Hi! Welcome back to Billy's VHS tapes. Today we're going all the way back to the Stone Age with 1994's The Flintstones. A movie about a family living in the Stone Age with some modern twists. Let's do some fun facts. The movie is based on the first cartoon sitcom from the 1960s, created by William Hanna and Joseph Barbera. Hanna-Barbera is responsible for some of the most famous cartoon faces from 1957 to 2001. The movie was produced by Steven Spielberg and directed by Brian Levant. They wanted the movie to match the theme of the show by having a sitcom vibe, so they hired a very large team of well-known sitcom writers to write the movie. The movie stars John Goodman as Fred Flintstone, Elizabeth Perkins as Wilma, Rick Moranis as Barney Rubble, and Rosie O'Donnell as Betty Rubble. The dinosaur puppets were created by the legendary team at the Jim Henson Company. They spliced in some CGI to make the dinosaurs seem more real. The CGI was provided from another legendary team at Industrial Light and Magic. A video game tie-in was developed and released for the Super Nintendo, the Game Boy, and the Sega Genesis. You play as Fred, who is on a mission to rescue his friends and family, as you guide him through levels that are loosely based on the movie. Universal did a mega tie-in deal with McDonald's, who not only featured Happy Meal toys and collectible cups, but also temporarily rebranded themselves to Rock Donald's. And if that wasn't enough, they also brought back the McRib because of how much Fred Flintstone loves ribs. The movie spawned a prequel 6 years later after everyone had lost interest in the first movie. Not even sure how this movie got a prequel because critics hated the first one when it came out, even though it brought in way more money at the box office than it took to make it. The movie cost $46 million to make and it brought in over $342 million at the box office. Critics tore the movie to bits, but I love it, so without further ado, let's watch it!
And now, our feature presentation.
The movie opens at Slate Rock and Gravel Company, where we see the caveman workers using dinosaurs to break down rocks. Inside the office building, we meet our villains of the movie, Cliff and Miss Stone, played by Kyle MacLachlan and the beautiful Halle Berry. They're looking for the perfect patsy to take the fall for their plan to embezzle from the company. Cut to our leading man, Fred Flintstone, who's more than excited to get off work. He slides down the tail of his dinosaur wrecker and lands in his foot-powered car. As he speeds off to pick up the family, we hear the theme song from the 60s cartoon show. The Flintstone family load up into the car and they're off to the drive-in, where the sign says that George Lucas's Star Wars is playing, but instead we're treated to a story about the fabulous Flintstone family. The opening credits lead us to Fred and Barney's car ride home from work. Barney is super excited because Fred was kind enough to loan him and Betty the money they need to adopt a child. At the Flintstone house, we meet Wilma, Pebbles, and Dino. But Fred didn't tell Wilma about the loan that he gave to Barney, and she's unhappy about it missing from the bank account. But when Fred tells Wilma what he spent it on, it leads to a really sweet moment between the couple. Cut to the adoption agency where we meet Betty, who's nervous about becoming a new mom. We then meet Bam Bam, who up until his time spent at the adoption agency was raised by wild mastodons.
Mastodons? Let's not nitpick, a mammal's a mammal.
Bam Bam still clings to his wild roots and is skittish around humans. When Wilma tries to snap a photo of him meeting his new parents, he freaks out, and he takes off down the street. We then get a montage of the Rubbles cleaning up their new son and trying to teach him to adapt to life inside. Things are a little rough at first, and it doesn't help that Bam Bam seems to possess superhuman strength. But eventually, he warms up to Barney and Betty, and he allows them to be his forever people. Bam Bam was played by someone's name I can't pronounce, but his voice was provided by Elizabeth Daily, who you may remember from such 90s cartoons as Tommy Pickles on the Rugrats and Buttercup on the Powerpuff Girls. Next we see Fred and Barney at the bowling alley with their lodge brothers, the Loyal Order of the Water Buffalo.
Come on, Twinkle Toes.
After the brothers win the game, Barney delivers a speech that brings Fred to tears. Barney promises that one day he'll pay Fred back for his kindness, someday, somehow. The next day at the quarry, Cliff announces that the workers will be given an aptitude test to determine which one of them will be given an executive promotion. Barney playfully scoffs at the idea, but Fred is more than intrigued at the chance to become a somebody. A humble caveman with something to prove, and his best friend who's willing to do anything to help him out? Sounds like a movie plot to me! Barney seems to breeze through the test, while Fred struggles to come up with the correct answers. The hourglass empties and it chisels down. As Barney takes both his and Fred's tests up to the front, he notices that Fred's answers aren't going to get him anywhere. Barney remembers the promise that he made, and in an effort to help Fred excel, he swaps their tests. But it turns out, Barney actually got the highest test score, and now Cliff and Miss Stone think that Fred is the perfect patsy for their scheme, and they announce Fred as the newest member of the executive board. The next morning, Fred suits up and heads off for his new job. Cliff immediately starts to fill Fred's head with the idea that he now has a large amount of power and he can do anything he wants, as long as he does what he's told. With Fred being so eager to prove that he's a somebody, he tells Cliff that he'll do whatever he says. But Cliff wants Fred to fire Barney. After work, Barney and Betty throw a party for Fred to congratulate him on his new job. But when Fred's guilt comes off as ungrateful, he tells Barney in front of everyone that he has to fire him. Outside, Fred and Barney have a drink, and Fred reveals to Barney that the reason he's been canned is because he got the lowest score on the aptitude test.
Lowest score? What a twist!
The next day, Fred walks in late to a meeting, where Cliff is pitching an idea that he can triple Mr. Slate's profits 4 times. Mr. Slate was played by Dan Florek, and he was the perfect casting choice for this role. He looks exactly like Mr. Slate from the cartoon. It's awesome. By introducing machinery into their business model, they can lay off the caveman workers and collect their salaries for profit. Step 2 in Cliff's plan to embezzle from the company. Also, this scene gives us a cameo from Mr. William Hanna of Hanna-Barbera. In Fred's office, Miss Stone has some forms for him to sign. Fred is curious about the forms that he's been blindly signing off on and decides this one he's going to take a peek at. But Miss Stone distracts him with her stones.
Besides, reading is my job. You wouldn't want to put poor little old me out of work now, would you?
No. Your wife. Your wife.
My wife. Wilma? Wilma! What a surprise!
Wilma arrives to tell Fred that the Rubbles are going to be staying with them until they get back on their feet. We see the two families struggling with their new living situation, and the next day, we see that Fred is struggling with his new work situation. As he looks over the new quarry plans, he's worried about his buddies losing their jobs. But money talks, and Cliff distracts Fred with a big bonus and tells him he needs to start living like an executive. We get a montage scene set to the Flintstones theme song by the B-52s, where we see Fred and Wilma upgrading their lives and climbing the social ladder. We also see the Rubbles climbing down the social ladder and resenting the Flintstones for flaunting their newfound success. Later on, we see Fred and Wilma out to dinner and dancing, where we then get a cameo from the B-52s, who perform an original song for the movie. You'd think that the Flintstones would be more into the Rolling Stones. The Flintstones have brought Betty along with them to dinner, and Barney just happens to be there working his new busboy job. Tensions are high between the two couples, and when Barney goes to grab a new tablecloth, he overhears on the news that Fred has fired all the caveman workers from the quarry. They squabble, and then Barney reveals that the only reason Fred got the executive job was because Barney swapped tests with him. After Barney punches out...
Hang on, Betty. I forgot to punch out.
The Rubbles decide they're moving out that night, and they head to the Flintstone place to pack up their stuff. Also, one of the people at the restaurant just happens to be Mr. Joseph Barbera of Hanna-Barbera. Wilma immediately regrets her actions that led to her losing her friends. Making a scene, she destroys all the fancy things that they've bought, and she packs a bag to head to her mother's place. Fred is left alone with his new life as a somebody, but he's pushed away all the people that he wanted to impress. The next day, as Fred makes his way into work, he's pelted with rocks by the caveman workers who are picketing outside the quarry. Fred heads straight for the file room to look at the documents he's been blindly signing off on, and finds out that he is in fact responsible for all of his friends losing their jobs. Furious, he confronts Cliff and Miss Stone and threatens to go to the police. But Cliff reminds Fred that he spent an awful lot of company money recently, and if he goes to the police, it might not turn out the way he thinks it will. Cliff reveals his big plan to embezzle from the company and blame it all on Fred. That night, Betty and Bam Bam show up at Wilma's mother's place because Betty misses her friend, while Fred has hit the streets in a disguise to try to get some information from his co-workers. But his fake beard falls off and he's recognized, and they chase him through the streets. They catch him just as Barney pulls up selling snow cones at his new job. Barney tells the lynch mob that none of this would have happened if it wasn't for him. So the mob decides to string both him and Fred up. Meanwhile, at the quarry, Wilma and Betty sneak in with the idea that the bird on Fred's desk may have all the information they need to prove that he's innocent. In the other room, Miss Stone notices that Cliff has only purchased one getaway ticket, and she realizes that Cliff plans on leaving her behind. They hear Wilma and Betty running out the front door, and Cliff realizes he's forgotten to tie up a loose end.
Son of a brachiosaurus.
Back at the lynching, Fred and Barney make up just before they're about to bite the big one. But Wilma and Betty ram the tree with their car that has the lynch ropes tied to it, knocking it over, saving Fred and Barney. The girls ask the caveman workers to gather around the bird and listen to a story of fraud and deceit. When the Flintstones return home, Wilma's mother and Dino have been tied up, and Pebbles and Bam Bam are missing. They find a note telling them to bring the bird to the quarry at dawn if they ever want to see their kids again. At dawn, Cliff greets Fred and Barney at the quarry. The boys hand over the bird with a plan to rescue everyone.
I should have signed with Disney. They never would have allowed this sort of thing to happen.
But after he has the bird, Cliff double-crosses them. He activates the new machine with the kids on top of it, sending them to their doom. While Fred tries to turn off the machine, Barney makes his way to the kids. But when he gets there, Bam Bam finally says something that isn't Bam Bam, and he calls Barney Dada for the first time.
You did it! You called me Dada!
Oh, Barney, you lunkhead!
With Barney knocked out, it's up to Fred to save the day. Fred gets the idea to use one of the mechanisms as a catapult to fire a boulder into the machine, hoping to destroy the machine, saving Barney and the kids. On his way to do so, he's confronted by Cliff, but Cliff is knocked out by the sexy Miss Stone. She's turned over a new leaf after being betrayed by Cliff.
Will there be anything else, Mr. Flintstone?
No, Miss Stone, take the rest of the day off.
The water mixes with the rocks, creating concrete for the first time in history. As Fred fires a boulder at the machine, destroying it just in time. Cliff tries to escape, but old Twinkletoes bowls a rock at him to trip him up. As the police show up, the concrete spills down the side of the cliff. Just as Cliff happens to be running around the corner, the concrete spills over the side, turning Cliff into a statue. The police seize the falsified documents and Miss Stone is arrested.
Well, I've been a very bad girl, but you have to admit, I was very, very good at it.
But Mr. Slade is more concerned about the new potential building material that's going to make the company lots of money.
Oh, I like money.
Mr. Slate tells Fred that he plans on making him the head of the concrete department, and he tells him to hire back all the caveman workers to work under him. But Fred respectfully declines. Fred has learned that when he became a somebody, he turned into somebody he didn't like. In return for the concrete idea, all Fred wants is...
All I want is my old job back and my old life. And 2 weeks paid vacation for all the men in the quarry, an annual cost of living increase, and those little packets of ketchup in the lunchroom.
Mr. Slate agrees to the deal, and the Flintstones and the Rubbles head off to breakfast. We zoom out, and we're back at the drive-in, where we hear the ending credits theme song play from the cartoon show. On their way home, the Flintstones stop at Rockdonald's, and just like in the cartoon, we see their car topple over after a giant rack of ribs is placed on the side of it. Back at the house, we get 2 more iconic moments. Fred tries to throw the cat out for the night, but ends up getting thrown out himself, and the movie ends with him yelling for Wilma.
Have a gay old time.
Wilma! And that's it. That's the Flintstones, a family comedy based on a classic cartoon. I love the set design of this movie. It makes me believe that this modern Stone Age actually exists. Maybe in another universe? Do I recommend it? I'm gonna go ahead and recommend this movie to everyone because I've never met anyone who's told me that they don't enjoy this movie. Everyone loves the old Flintstones cartoon, and in my opinion, this is a pretty perfect live-action adaptation. The casting is close to perfect. The world that they've built on screen is surreal but also semi-believable, and the jokes are on par with the old cartoon show. Movies are based on opinion. You can't always trust what the critics say. And you know, you can't always trust the guy on YouTube who's in a bunker full of tapes. Watch it for yourself and tell me what you think about it in the comments. And hey, if you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe so you can see more of them. And double hey, if you've been here before and you're watching again, you might as well share them with your friends. Maybe you guys will agree with my opinions. Maybe you guys will point and laugh at me and think, hey, that guy's a dingus. Either way, you're watching the video and that's really great. But seriously, thank you so much for watching. Also follow my social media pages where I post updates about this channel and super cool pop culture stuff. Hope to see you in the next one. Yabba dabba deuces.
Flintstones, preferred by more moms than any other children's vitamin.
I'm growing.
The Flintstones has been brought to you by Winston, America's best-selling, best-tasting filter cigarette. It still tastes good like a cigarette.